We think mobile is actually incredibly important, right? So we think that the first thing to do is actually not think of mobile just as another channel. It is really a different way of actually approaching your customers. It's actually a different, it's causing fundamental changes in how people behave and connect to each other and entertainment, content, and utility. So when we think about how we actually help marketers really become mobile first marketers, the three things that we actually ask them to think about. First of all, how do you actually start thinking about beyond segments of people to actually really identifying the moments that matter in their lives, right? Because mobile is the one thing that makes life addressable because you have it with you all the time. So it's really about, number one, is thinking about moments. The second is really thinking about actually how you actually create content for the mobile kind of environment, right? Because I think one of the things that is interesting about that is that even though it's a smaller form factor, mobile is also one of the devices that people actually can watch long form video on. But if they're really at home, right, or in a place where they have really good connectivity. So being aware of the context when you create that content is really important. The whole kind of like video format thing that's really become like a big deal for things like Vine and Snapchat and so on. That's a big deal. So making content that's specific to mobile. And the third thing is really how you actually think about your brand as a piece of software, right? Because I think that's the thing that actually becomes most relevant in people's lives is making sure that your brand is able to connect and deliver utility in the right moments in people's lives.
So how do you mean that? You mean creating brands, apps for brands, or what do you mean?
Yeah, there's a couple ways to think about that. One is actually literally the case what you just talked about, right? So for example, like an app like the Taco Bell mobile ordering app that we did, right, which actually allowed people to order and customize their orders at Taco Bell. It's a fabulous experience. I urge you to try that if you like Taco Bell. So that's one thing. It's literally kind of a piece of kind of software that manifests the brand and the utility in some interesting way. I think the other way actually to think about it is a little bit more metaphorical in the sense of it implies a different way of actually working around marketing, right? And one that it's actually much more about, it's less about campaigns because software is never really done, right? Just like marketing shouldn't really be done. And right now we're kind of timed to like finite, bound campaigns, and we think that's really about kind of an always-on type of approach to actually doing campaigning, doing marketing. The second is really thinking about data, right? Like software, the big fuel of software is data, and so data has to be at the core of how you think about marketing. And the third is obviously thinking about how do we actually think about reaching people in terms of the algorithms that you need to actually reach them. So there's like the rise of programmatic and kind of how we actually really think about that algorithm that you're delivering to the programmatic kind of platforms as being a kind of really an expression of the brand itself, because that's it's really who you're trying to reach, the moment that you're trying to reach them in.
Getting back to the form factor on mobile video that you referenced earlier. So let's talk about that. There's been a lot of talk about moving to vertical video format, which is kind of a big deal, certainly in terms of creative. But talk about how brands can function with mobile video, either through custom content, through ad units, and also about things that are bubbling up like Facebook, which is obviously becoming huge. So what does the landscape look like in terms of the form factor and the opportunities for brands in mobile video?
So we think it's really huge, right? Because first of all, we think video, like when we think about mobile video, there's a couple of different kind of cases that you're thinking about. One is there's kind of user-generated mobile video, which is a big part, like a huge part of that ecosystem where we really we haven't really figured out kind of as a collective, like as an industry, how to really kind of harness. But that's the kind of the vertical formats. It's the way that and actually how we're thinking about it is how do we actually create instead of how do we actually create brand content, right? That actually is in the same way and using the same kind of visual or video language that people use when they actually film each other on their phones, right? So that's to really kind of be to be much more relevant in people's lives and from a cultural standpoint. So that's one thing. So really kind of, how do we actually use the form factor? I think about how we use that form factor in a way that we create content, that goes to users. But the second part of that is also thinking about how do we actually kind of be a part of these experiences and really think about creating video that is specific to digital and to mobile in particular, right? So what I mean by that is, a lot of times what happens in like mobile video, or in video advertising in the digital space, is that they use a kind of repurposed or recut, TV kind of content, right? Content that was meant for a TV ad. And that really doesn't work in a space where, people, you got 6 seconds, or you got 15 seconds, or you got maybe 4 seconds before people are able to hit forward. So you have to really rethink kind of how you're telegraphing that message and how you're telling a story like as little as 6 seconds, or just putting the message out there in an interesting way in 6 seconds, so people actually will continue to watch the entire rest of the thing. I think it's a mistake for advertisers to think about it as, oh, I could just kind of repurpose existing content for mobile video. You really have to think about it in a very, very different way because of the context in the form factor that's involved.
And there's been a lot of talk about autoplay, autoplay silent, which seems so counterintuitive to a TV commercial, but it's not a TV commercial, I suppose.
Yeah, it's not. Well, that's exactly it. It's not a TV ad, right? It is something that is really kind of, it's native to the mobile and digital world. I think it's native, particularly to mobile, because people are watching these things in crowded places, and you don't want everybody to hear what you're watching. I think it's actually I think constraints breeds creativity. Right. So, some of the most creative things have come when there have been kind of specific constraints put on the form factor. So I think I'm really looking forward to, as this format kind of starts to take hold, I'm really looking forward to kind of really interesting breakthrough work that wouldn't have occurred to anybody who actually just had a TV ad brief. Right, because they didn't, because they're shooting with sound, they could do a lot of CGI post-production, all that kind of good stuff. Here, you've got like 6 seconds or 15 seconds, it plays without sound. You really have to figure out what is that visual kind of storytelling that you're going to do to get people in and actually pay attention.
And as Digitas does a lot of stuff, what about on the creative side and creating this sort of media? Are you doing that sort of thing? Or?
Absolutely. We have, so as you know, Scott Donaton is recently joined. He's our Chief Content Officer. And we've got Ronald Ung, who is a tremendous kind of talent. He's our Chief kind of Creative Officer for North America. And they're really, really focused on kind of, using native digital kind of forms to tell stories for brands, right? And to actually create stories for brands and to enable people to create their own stories around those brands. So we're working on some really exciting things right now. We've got actually an in-house production capability, and it's pretty state of the art. So we're working with a lot of the people who, in that space to kind of figure out how do we actually really use those limitations not as a point of arrival, but as a point of departure, and really kind of use that as a springboard into much more creative things.